The flooding and landslides in KwaZulu-Natal have been declared a provincial disaster. The South African Weather Service has said that some of the exceptionally heavy rainfall exceeded even their own expectations. And these events have thrust extreme weather and climate change into the spotlight. We're joined now by Greenpeace Africa climate and energy campaigner Thandiwe Chinyavanhu. Good evening to you, and thank you very much for joining us on the program. A lot of us are asking the question, what caused the heavy rains and landslides in KwaZulu-Natal?
Good evening, Iman, and thank you so much for having me. The science is unequivocal. The torrential rain that was in KwaZulu-Natal was caused by climate change. The rise in global temperatures has disrupted our weather patterns and led to torrential rains like the ones that we've been witnessing. And if our government does not act decisively now to turn this around, we will be faced with more extreme weather events like this.
And when we talk about a turnaround, and we will come to some of the measures that we can take a little bit later on, but history is germane to how we understand what's happened here. You had the disaster of 1987 wrought by Tropical Storm Des Moines. I was actually a kid in KwaZulu-Natal during those years, and it left massive damage to KwaZulu-Natal, including bridges being washed away. 300 lives were lost in that event. Fast forward to 2019 April, severe showers and flooding claiming the lives of more than 80 people in the Ugu and King Cetshwayo districts in KZN. This should have been a clear warning to the government of the vulnerability of communities to heavy mudslides and floods, should it not have?
Definitely, Iman. I think what's clear here is that our government has seen and experienced the extreme weather events of the past, and they've had the necessary research in front of them that's been produced over the past 34 years by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And that research has revealed that these extreme weather events will be increasing in intensity and frequency. And that's definitely what we're seeing now. It's not a matter of something that's happened, decades ago. It's happening within just a few years of each other. And as we reach that 1.5 degrees Celsius barrier, we're going to realize that these are happening more frequently than just a matter of years. It's going to become the norm.
I mean, as you point out there's consensus amongst people like yourselves, the experts, that these sorts of events are likely to happen again, potentially soon. What are the warning signs that we can look at in the environment, and then what can we do to mitigate them?
Well, there are early warning systems that our government has in place to be able to determine when issues like this are going to arise. And from those, they're able to initiate responses before they reach the level that they have, such as evacuation plans, where they should be evacuating most vulnerable people, women, children, and people with disabilities that could be the most impacted by these extreme weather events. Unfortunately, based on the reports that are coming out from the ground, there seems to be a very poor response from the disaster management team. Many people are without water, without food, and don't have shelter. So this is very much a lackluster response that we're getting from our government, and definitely concerning, and will definitely be something that we consider going forward when we respond to climate change, that whether we trust our government to be able to handle the onslaught of extreme weather events that are going to be coming.
Here's one of the things I struggle with, Thandi. When you look at the way government responds to these things, they respond almost in the same way, especially, government departments and, deploy, people who are appointed in certain portfolios to take care of all these areas you're talking about, respond almost the same way to disasters as the ordinary citizen. And yet they're not the same, because they have access to the information, they have access to the power to make the policy changes, they have access to the budgets or the funds and the appointing of, competent individuals to make sure that planning is done correctly, housing is built properly, and it's built in the right areas. What you're saying now, it's so astounding that this information is available. It's simply not being, acted on and responded to in the correct manner. What are your thoughts on that?
It is absolutely astounding the way that you put it. As experts and pundits have put it, the climate is warming at a faster rate than we could have previously assessed. And so what we're seeing right now is that the government has access to this information. They've approved the wording of these documents and they acknowledge it. They have made the commitments to the Paris Agreement, and yet we're not seeing the necessary action that we need from them. We're very good with policy documents, but struggle with implementation. And that's something that is becoming more pervasive as we continue. Something that, as you mentioned, it is very astounding that our government is not putting in the action that they need to, despite the fact that they have the knowledge. They know that the climate crisis is getting worse. They've had the data for years, and they are not acting on the commitments that they've made to the Paris Agreement. And if they continue at this stage, we will see only these extreme weather events getting worse and increasing in intensity and frequency.
I want to save room for us to talk about how, direct human behavior is contributing to climate change and what we have in our everyday homes to be able to, again, mitigate the potential impact. But I want to go back to the 1987 event. It was referred to as a 100-year event. Out of interest, does the fact that we've now witnessed such heavy rains and flooding in that province within less than 100 years, does that mean that the intervals are accelerating, or is this an unrelated comparison?
It is a matter that maybe we'd have to consult more of the science to see, but it seems that with the change in our temperatures and our weather patterns that we're experiencing, that maybe those assessments don't necessarily hold as much water as they might have previously. But what we do know is that this is going to become something that happens more frequently. I think it's also important to note that our government has clear priorities in this issue around climate change. And it's clear that their priorities lie with the fossil fuel companies that are responsible for these emissions. The average person cannot make the difference that needs to be made. That responsibility and the onus lies with our government to be able to rope in fossil fuel majors like Sasol, like Eskom, that are contributing towards our global emissions. So we need to see our government actually reining in those companies, creating the necessary policy measures and implementing it for us to see a turnaround on the trajectory that we're on. It's time that the government put people before profit.
And that, again, is a point that's been made over and over again. But are you saying then that us, separating our waste at source, recycling and trying to behave in greener ways, has less of an impact than big industry? I mean, obviously it does, but does it make some impact?
It makes no impact. It is a false solution. In South Africa, only 10% of our waste is recycled. So in order for us to actually make a turnaround, we need to focus on the most important emission sources. And that right now is the fossil fuel companies that are accelerating our global temperature rise.
Thank you so much for sharing with us your expertise and your research. Thandiwe Chinyavanhu is the climate and energy campaigner at Greenpeace Africa.